Hello and welcome to this week's tutorial. My name is Jamie. I'd just like to say thanks to everyone that's watching, because I just recently passed 50 subscribers, which isn't necessarily a huge number in as far as like internet YouTube terms go, but the 50 of you that are sort of saying thanks for the good videos and keep them coming by hitting subscribe is nice. And the other bit of news is that I got a nice new computer. Excuse me. Um, so now I can do nice things like fire and smoke, which I've spent the last few days really getting to know. So I'm going to do a tutorial on how to make a fireball. Sort of fireball I'm thinking of is a sort of fantasy mage has just created this fireball and he's about to shoot it out at his enemies and sorry about my throat, creates a big explosion on his enemies. I won't go into the explosion part, just for the sake of time, but hopefully from what I show you, you should be able to sort of tinker around and figure things out. I think the best thing for anyone learning the smoke simulator and how to turn it into fire is really just to play with all the settings. That's where I'll sort of learn the most, because you can sort of follow the tutorials and mostly it's just getting the right settings for the effect you're trying to make, and there's a couple of things that you sort of have to make sure that you do, otherwise it's just going to look like crap every time. But mostly, yeah, it's just sort of the settings, and once you sort of figure out and get to know them, you can sort of create the fire effects that you like and create them how you want them. So I guess I'll get straight into it. I'll start, because we want to create a fireball, the default cube I'm not going to use to start off with. I'll just delete that and I'll shift A, and I'm going to use an icosphere. The reason I'm using an icosphere is because all the faces are the same size, whereas in a UV sphere you've got sort of different sized squares all the way up to triangles at the top. Whereas, yeah, in the icosphere it's all very uniform. I'll just turn the divisions up a little bit. Yeah, it's all very uniform, and so it's a bit more easy to control what's going on, which is important when you're doing some sort of high level production sort of stuff. This probably won't be at that level, but you could easily sort of push this effect to get to that level. The first thing we want to do is go to the particles panel and add in a new particle system. And what's going to happen is the particles are going to spit out, and then the smoke effect is going to sort of generate off the particles. So we sort of want to keep the particles moving only a short amount of distance, but I want a lot of them to sort of create that sort of, it's a fireball and there's the fire sort of moving around, and it's a light and stuff. So we want quite a few particles. I'm going to go with 25,000. So if I just hit Alt A, you can already see the particles are spewing out. I do want a relatively short life, so I'm turning that down to 20. So they're dying a bit quicker now. And I don't want any gravity on these. I don't want the fireball to be affected by gravity, because the fireball I'm thinking of is it's magic, so it doesn't necessarily follow all the rules in the real world. So just by turning gravity off, you can already sort of get an idea of this is a fireball and it's sort of constantly moving around, the sort of flames are flickering. It's going to look quite nice. One of the first pitfalls you need to remember every single time, because I spent about 2 hours this afternoon with this fire effect the fire was looking nice, but I had this really crappy thing coming around it, and it is here. Turn off halo to none, because basically you don't want halo at any point. Anyway, it's a very not very useful thing to have, but you don't want the particles to be rendering anyway, so turn them to none. And just so we can see them, I'm just going to turn them to point on display here, so we can see what the particles are doing. And then I suppose the next thing to do is add the domain. The domain is the area in which the smoke effect is going to take place, and that's just going to be a cube for this. So create a cube. I'm just going to wireframe mode, scale it up, probably about that much, maybe a little bit bigger. The bigger the bigger the domain, the longer everything's going to take to calculate, because it sort of thinks about the domain as a whole object rather than there's only a part of it is smoky. And that's most of the initial setup. Now we just need to, in the physics panel here, just click on the smoke to enable it, and this object that we've got selected, the cube, is going to be the domain. I'll leave those settings at default for now, and we'll go to the sphere with the particle effect on it and enable smoke for that as well. And this one's going to be the flow, which is where all the smoke comes from, and you can see straight away we've got some smoke coming into the scene, which is quite nice. So I suppose we'll just set the flow values. I want the initial velocity on, and I actually found cranking it up to 2 was about where I wanted it for me. And we want this on, and I'll turn the temperature just down to 0.5. That's the temperature difference to ambient temperature. I found it just helps keep things a bit smoother and nicer as I like them. And for the domain, I had the divisions at 50. The divisions is sort of how nice you want the smoke effect to be. But the higher the divisions, as you can see here, it's at a cost of speed and everything for the effect to generate and everything. What we'll do for the border collisions here, just turn them to open, so that any smoke colliding with the edge is it just sort of disappears through the edge rather than getting smushed up against it. And just go back to start, see how it's looking. Okay. I like the vorticity. I like to move that up to 4. And at the moment, all I've really been looking at is this first few frames, because what I'm doing is I'm going to turn on dissolve, turn off slow, because that just makes the dissolve sort of multiply by a huge amount. As you see with the 5 frames, everything's sort of disappearing quite quickly. So my sort of final value is about 25. It sort of depends on how much of a tendrily effect you want coming off the fireball, is how long the dissolve's going to be. So that's starting to look quite nice. Okay, I'm not going to turn on smoke high resolution yet, because that changes some settings and it takes a lot longer to calculate. So for now, this is sort of a lower resolution sort of testing guy. Firstly, before I do anything else, I'm going to go into the particles and turn off the rendering of the emitter, because I don't want that sphere to be in there. You can, if you want, you can use it, keep it on, and have some sort of a lavery texture maybe, just to sort of help the effect. Maybe with a bit, turn the emission up a bit to sort of give it a bit of a glow. But I personally just want the fire from the smoke to be used. So for the texturing of the smoke, because at the moment it's just smoke and it's not going to look like anything else. If I just Alt A to pause that and go F12, I mean for now you're only looking at a cube. So you've got to set a few textures to even be able to see the smoke. So to start off with the material, create a new material and turn it to a volume and turn the density all the way down, and might start, no, can't see anything yet, that's okay. We need to set a few settings in the material just to get it going. I've got the emission at 8 in mine. So the higher the emission, the brighter your fire is going to be. 20 is sort of a very, very, very bright fire. But I've sort of, for the sake of not overpowering everything, especially, I'm thinking I've got a scene with a bunch of characters and I've got this wizard casting a fireball. I don't want everything to be super blown out just by this fireball. So I've got the emission at 8 and the scattering here is at 0.5. And another thing to keep in mind is the step size here. 0.2 is the default and it's going to make everything look grainy. The lower that value is, the less grainy it's going to look. Think of it as sort of the anti-aliasing for the fire effect. Except sort of 0.5 is, or sorry, 0.05 is probably the sort of the highest you would have it in a sort of production environment, and sort of you go from there the closer you get to 0 is the sort of nicer the flame effects is going to look, but it does come at a cost in rendering time, just like anti-aliasing does. So where the real magic happens is in the textures. This is mostly sorry, Andrew Price's technique, which he got off some other guy, Mika or something. And I went through a couple of his fire tutorials and I've sort of adjusted the effect to suit my needs. So I've added a texture and we're going to be using voxel data, and the domain is the cube object, which is the domain that we set earlier, and I'll just bring that out so you can see what everything is. We don't want this to affect the emission, we only want it to sort of affect the density, and it sort of should start to bring out the smoke now. So as you see, it's very bright. That's just because the emission it's quite high for a normal texture or a normal material, but for the fire, you'll see in a minute, it won't look that bright at all. So I've added another texture with the voxel data, and the domain object is cube. And this time we do want this emission value to say this is actually emission color. If you hover over it, you see amount, texture, effects, emission color. This is just normal emission. And we want this to be multiply, so that it sort of goes on top of the previous texture. And I'll just name this second texture fire, so you know, sort of can tell which is which. And just open up this colors and turn on the ramp, and this color ramp is sort of defining the look of the flame. So what I've got, which is quite a bit different to Andrew's, is I've got yellow all the way down here, and I've got two more there. So bring this all the way up, bring the alpha all the way up. I just lost that, and I want to make this sort of a medium orange, and I want that to be very close to the yellow all the way at the bottom, and then this one I want to be red, with alpha at 1, and I want this to be about there, and then this at the end here is just transparency, and I'm bringing that all the way down. Now hopefully should look okay. Just hit F12, and you can see sort of the fire sort of coming to fruition, but I'm going to want to adjust the colour settings a bit on the ramp, so I'll just escape and sort of start to bring, as you can see in this preview window, you can see how much everything sort of affects. So you can see quite a bit of fire going on there, so I'll just hit render, and you can see it's all very sort of orangey red at the moment, so maybe I want a bit more yellow. Hit render again, so I'm starting to get a bit more yellow in places now. It's possible I don't want it quite that dense, so just sort of a loose fireball going on. Maybe I want it a bit more. So that's sort of starting to look nice there. That's most of the actual fire effect. If you want to have it so you can just sort of save and load the file and not have to sort of generate the smoke each time, in your physics panel with your domain selected, the smoke cache is where you do all the work, and this is all grayed out because I haven't saved the file yet. So all you're going to do is save the file and hit the start and end, and just hit bake all dynamics, and it will bake everything for you. So the next time you load the file, you won't have to go for everything. But for now, I'm not going to worry about baking. So with the fire effect, I haven't used smoke high resolution on purpose yet, just to sort of show you the effect you can get without the high resolution smoke effects. It does look quite nice already, especially when you got it animated and motion. It sort of looks quite cool because when you, as you see, when the sort of smoke, I'll just play, as it sort of comes into existence, it sort of comes into existence as you'd imagine a magical fireball would. And it just sort of sits there and sort of continues to generate bits of flame, which is quite cool. So I'll turn on the high resolution now, which is here, and I've just kept the divisions at 1 for now, and the FFT is generally a bit nicer. Wavelet is usually okay, but if you can, FFT is nice, and I've turned the strength all the way down to 0.1, because I don't want it to be super noisy, because the smoke high resolution, it already makes it a bit noisier just by adding more divisions into everything. So I've turned the strength way down, and it still creates a fairly nice effect. I'll just let this generate for a few seconds so I've got something to render. As you can see, it's sort of, there's some more detail coming into the actual fire effect now, or into the smoke, which is of course good for high level production and stuff. So that'll do. Of course I hit escape, Don't hit escape. Okay, let it generate. I'll just let it get to 30, and then Alt A to pause it. Okay. F12 to render that just without any settings changed. As you can see, I've completely lost the density of the flames, so I'm just going to go back to the ramp. If you lose it, this button here gets you back to the textures to do with the material. And I've just moved all of these up quite a bit. I've got the red amount there, and up at the orange, all the way down there. See how that looks. Now that's looking quite nice for a fireball. So yeah, you can see there's sort of more tendrily stuff coming off from the fireball, and it sort of generates quite a nice effect. I'll just show you a quick render with the step size. I'll just put it down at 0.05, just to sort of give you an idea of what you can be looking at. So as you can see, it's a lot less pixely, and it's sort of just smoothed everything over and made it look nice. If you zoom in, I mean, it's pixely as you'd expect, but it's basically being anti-aliased between the particles, or the sort of smoke voxels that are used to generate the effect, because the normal anti-aliasing doesn't really work. So I think that just about covers it. I'll try and render out a really nice high resolution fireball, and I'll upload that after this. So I think yeah, that's everything. So I hope you've found this to be informative, useful. Let me know if you need any extra help on this subject or any other subject. Please let me know if you've got any tutorials that you'd like to see. I think I might do a bit of character modelling next week. Might go into UV mapping and stuff. Who knows? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.